So you made it to part 3 of Wiggle Racer. Congratulations, you're still alive. In the last part, if you remember, we got our game set up so that we can go from an intro screen to our game, but nothing is actually happening now. So let's go ahead and take care of setting that up. On our timeline, I'm going to make a new layer on our main stage. And where am I going to put this? I'll put this, I guess, in between intro and end screens. I'm going to rename this Racers. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our library, drag out 2 copies of our Racer movie clip, and I'm going to give one an instance name of MC Player, and I'm going to give the other instance name of MC Computer 1. And now that we have these 2 set up, I'm going to just move these around just a little bit so that they start on the very left hand side of our screen, and we can make them go all the way over. I'm going to distribute the vertical center. Just get them nice and neat towards the left side of your screen, of your stage. And once we have that set up, let's run and see what happens. Well, first of all, they are on our intro screen, which we don't want. And second of all, they are flashing back and forth. How do we fix that? Well, we can fix this similar, at least we can fix this problem about them showing on the intro screen, similar to how we fixed the problem of the end screen showing up in the beginning. And that's simply just removing them from the stage when we start. So let's go into our actions. And right here where we said remove child MC end screen, let's put a comment below it and say get rid of racers at start. And we're going to say remove child MC player, which is our first one, and then remove child MC computer 1. All right. And once you have that typed out, just go ahead and press Control Enter and confirm that your 2 racers are no longer on the stage, which they're not. So now if we click Start, what's going to happen? Well, they're not there again, right? We need to add them so that they show up. So let's go back, and before we, when we exit the intro screen, we just click that button and do some stuff, and now it's starting to get a little complicated. So I'm going to make another function to separate this stuff, and I'm going to call it function start game. Okay, and the return type will be void, and then pair of curly brackets. And what we're going to do here is everything that we need to do to start the game. So to start the game, well, what do we need to do? We need to change the game state to game, like we did here. And basically, we're going to move some stuff around. So this game state, it's not going to be in the exit intro screen function anymore. So I'm going to cut it. It's going to be in the start game screen, or function, excuse me. And then instead of doing that here, we're just going to say start game. So right here, when we exit our intro screen, after we remove the intro screen, we're going to start the game and do everything that we need to start the game. So let's just comment that out really quick. Set up game for start. All right, so we're going to start the game, and then what do we need to do? Well, we need to add back our MC player, right? And we need to add back our MC computer 1. Save, press enter, Control Enter, excuse me. You click start. Now we have our players here, but they're still flashing. How do we fix that? Well, if you remember, in our Racer movie clip, we provided a series of actions. A series of code functions and variables and all that sort of stuff. So we have the finish race boolean, and we have the pick color function. And remember to this will handle essentially picking a random color. So if we call pick color for our racers, then they'll stop flashing because we'll stop their color on a certain frame. So back into our main stage actions, what we're going to say is right before we add our children, we're going to say MC player dot pick color, open close parentheses, and I'm going to copy and paste this, and we're going to change this to MC computer 1. Oops, computer 1. So now if that works correctly, we should have 2 different colors. And they might not always be different colors because it is random. So there's a chance that they might end up being the same color, but we get different colors every time, which is just a neat little quirk we can add to our game. Okay, so this is giving us different colors, right? What do we need to do next? Well, we need to add some kind of functionality to our game. And this one doesn't seem to be changing. Did I do this right? MC pick color. Is it changing? Hold on, I just need to confirm this really quick. Okay, it does change. All right, so we need to actually do something with our game. Well, let's get set up by first moving our computer player. All right. And how can we move our computer player? Well, in our update game function. So if you go to your actions, in the update game, if the game state equals game, what do we want to do? Let's take MC computer 1, and we'll say the dot x plus equals 5. So now when we run and click start, you can see the player starts moving right away. That's not exactly fair because, well, our player's not ready, right? Our player wasn't ready to begin racing. Hey, just click start and, well, what do? I don't know what's going on. I need a little second to figure out what's going on. How do we do that? Well, let's set it up so that the player has to actually click on their player before the game starts. And how exactly do we do that? Well, under MC player, when we add them to the stage, what we want to do is say MC player dot add event listener. All right. And what are we going to listen for? We're going to listen for the mouse event click. And we're going to call a function called start race, which we have not created yet. Before I go any further, let's comment some of this stuff here. Say update game state. Say pick colors for racers. Add racers to stage. And we'll say add click listener for starting the race. And first, let's go ahead and take care of that function. So we can do it right below our start game function. We'll say function start race, just how we spelled it up here. And it's expecting the type mouse event. It's the click event. And we're not going to return anything. And what we're going to do here is change the game state. We need to kind of do either one of two things. We can create a Boolean for is the race started, or we can create a separate game state for our game. And the way I'm going to choose to handle this is with the Boolean. So on the very top, right underneath game state, we'll say for holding if the race is started or not. All right, we'll say var is race started. It'll be a Boolean, and we'll set it equal to false to start. Okay, so I'm going to copy this, go back down into start race, and all I'm going to do is say is race started equals true. All right, so once we have that done, well, we could run it, but it's not going to quite work just yet because the computer is still moving only when the game state is game. We need to add an extra condition that says if, right? So if is race started is true, then we want to do this where we move our person. So say if race started equals true, then we're going to do that. And let's test this out. So now if we run, we click start, our computer doesn't move yet, and when we click on the player, hey, there we go. Pretty cool, right? Now let's actually add something that gets our player to move. So back into our actions. How we're going to have the player move is that we want the user or player to wiggle their mouse over their racer. So we're going to need to add another event listener when we start our game, and we're going to say MC player dot add event listener. listen for the mouse event, mouse underscore move, and we'll call this move player. Add listener for mouse move. Sorry, let's say add listener for wiggle on player. All right. So once we have that, well, we need to create the function move player. So we'll say function. What do we want to say? Move player, right? Because that needs to match up. And let me center this for you. Function move player. Are we expecting something? Yes, we're expecting the mouse event. And we're not going to return anything, so we'll say void, and then open close parentheses. Say move the player, because that's what it's going to be doing. And what do we need to do here? Let's try just saying MC player, right, plus equals, oops, sorry, MC player.x plus equals 2. Okay, and if we run this, let's see what happens. We click start, go to click on our player, and whoa, our player is moving. What's going on? We're wiggling and the computer hasn't started yet. What? Don't need to, I can't even click on it. There we go. It's hard to do, right? Okay, so what's the problem here? Well, we didn't wait for the race to be started. So we only want to move the player if the race is started. So we'll say if is race started. We'll do this here as well. And we could check to see if the game state is game, but is race started is really only going to be true right now if we're in the game state. But let's do that. We're going to copy this from update game. So if game state equals game. Press enter, tap Control V, go down below our if statement and put a curly bracket. And now we have this thing in the middle, and notice how our tabs aren't perfectly lined up. If we select everything here and tap tab, it'll shift everything over by 1 tab. And if we hold shift and tab, it'll go to the left. So tab goes to the right, shift and tab goes to the left. I'm just going to tab it out once so it looks nice and pretty. So now if we run our game and click start, we can wiggle over our player all we want, but until we click on it, the game doesn't start and you gotta try and win. Cool, but the next thing we need to do is give it an end condition, right? We have a player, they're racing, but the game never actually ends. So let's make our game end whenever the player gets all the way to the right side of the screen. And what's the right side of the screen? Stage.stageWidth, right? So if we go underneath our actions on our main stage and we go down into move player, we'll say if the race is started, we'll move the player x plus equal 2. And then right below that, we'll say if mcPlayer.x is greater than stage.stageWidth, then what are we going to do? Well, we're going to end the game. So we'll say game state equals end. Or do you want to say end? We can actually just say add end screen because we already have game state end right here. Or we can just make a completely different function that says end game. And I'm going to go for that option. So I'm going to stop typing here for just 1 second. And I'm going to say function end game void. And what are we going to do? Well, first we're going to set game state equal to end. Okay. Oops. And then what we want to do is, well, now we can get rid of game state right here because we already changed it in end game. And then we can call add end screen, right? And remember, we need to give it some specific value that we're going to pass into our title. So let's just give it, I don't know, you can give it your name for now. I'm going to say Mr. Davis. You can put whatever you like, just so it's a test. So here, change game state, add end screen. And what this function is doing is handle everything related to ending the game. What else did we forgot to do? I'm sorry. We need to set the race started to false. So after we change game state to end, we should say end race. And we'll say is race started equals false. There we go. So now that we have this function, we need to put it right here. So end game semicolon. Let's comment this out. So if we're in the game section, if the race is started, move player to the right. If the player is off the right side of the stage, end the game. So let's test this out. Control Enter. And now we have Wiggle Racer. If I click Start, we have our player. Click on him. Okay, the game's going, the game's going, the game's going. And when I get to this, when I get to the right, it says Ravis, which my font's weird again, but it does add the end screen, and we can restart, but then we have a problem. So there's some things that we forgot to take care of. And if we go back into our actions, I'm going to change the name that we called really quick. Let me find this. I said Mr. Davis for add end screen, and I forgot that only lowercase works with my font, so I'm going to change this back to test. So what did we forget to do in endgame? Well, one, we forgot to remove our movie clips, right? We forgot to remove them from the stage. So how did we add them to the stage? Well, if you remember, up here we said add child MC player and add child MC computer 1. And let's go ahead and take care of that. So under endgame, after we change the game state and end the race, we need to say remove child MC player and then remove child MC computer 1. And this is going to be remove racers. Right? So now if we run, when we finish our game, or I guess when our player gets to the other side of the stage, okay, it removes our racers, but when we start again, notice how, well, he's still over here, and that doesn't really work, right? And why doesn't that work? Well, because they need to be back over to the left side. So let's go ahead and fix that. We can store our racer's original position when we start the game. And how we do that is, if we go under Actions, at the very top, let's make a variable. Okay, before we remove our racers, I'm going to say store original positions for racers. And actually, this will be original X positions for racers. So I'm going to say var original player X. It'll be an integer. Actually, it'll be a float. I'm sorry. Not an integer. Float. Number. Excuse me. It'll be a number because it can be a decimal value. We're going to set it equal to wherever MC player dot X is. And what that's going to do is wherever we put X in the start when we first run our program, it'll store that that value, and then later on when we reset our game, we can say, okay, now that we've reset, move our player back to the start. And once we have that, we need to say var original, I'll just say, oh, let's type it out, computer 1 X number equals MC computer 1 dot X. Let's also go ahead and store the Y values in case we decide to do, actually, do we need to store the Y values? Nah, let's not worry about Y values for now. So we're just going to say, when we begin, let's take a copy of where our player is and where our computer is and store it in these variables. So now, when we end our game, before we remove the racers, what we want to do is say MC player dot x equals original player x. And same thing with computer. MC computer 1 dot x equals original computer 1x. So reset to starting locations. And if this works now, we should have a game where we run, press start, click on our player, beat the game, and you can wiggle or just drag your mouse, whatever actually ends up working. We restart and cool, they're at their original positions. Well, that's awesome, but right now I'm saying test when I go to my end screen. Let's actually display what place our racer got in. So we can say you placed first, you placed second, something along those lines. How we can accomplish this is to count how many players or computers cross our finish line before our player does. So if our player finishes first, it'll say 1, but if the computer finishes first, we'll add on 1 to that, which will be 2, and I'll show you how to do that right now. So up at the very top, we want to say, let me put this right below our remove child, to say use to track player position, or not position, player, what would we call this? I guess rank. I don't want to say position or something like that because we might get confused with something else, but it's used to track the player rank at end of race. And we'll say var, let's call this, I don't know what we want to call this. You say, let's call it num racers finished. And that way we'll keep track of how many racers have already finished. It'll be an integer. And to start, we'll set it equal to 1. Because the num of racers finished, the way this works, if our player finishes first, they'll just be 1. So now we have that taken care of. What we can do is take this variable, right? Num racers finished. And if we go down into our, let's see. And if we want to go into update game, right now we're moving computer player and we are moving the player. Now we're checking to see if the player is off the right side of the stage. Well, let's check to see if the computer player is also off the right side of the stage. So I'll say in our update game, say if MC computer 1.x is greater than stage.stage width, meaning they went off the right side of the stage, then we want to take the number of racers finished and add on to it. So we're going to add 1 to number of racers finished. And actually, so this makes a little more sense. Let's set number of racers finished to 0. All right. So at the very top, we're going to set it equal to 0. And then later on, we'll just add 1 to the final value. And that way, it kind of makes a little more sense logically. So 0 is number of racers finished. And back to update game. If computer goes off the right side of the stage, then we'll add 1 to number of racers finished. So then when we end our game, right? And we end our game after we move our player and we check that they're off the right side of the stage, all we want to do is pass that value into add end screen. So if we just say underneath add end screen right here in end game, say add end screen, pass in the value num racers finished. But num racers finished is not a string, so that's going to give us a problem, and I'll prove that to you in just a second. And bam, errors. So we have an implicit coercion of a value type int to an unrelated type string, meaning we can't put an int into a string because I'm a dumb computer and I don't really know how to do that. So there are, let me go down and find this. There are 2 ways to fix this underneath our endgame. So you can say num racers finished, which has a built-in function called to string, which you can do like this, which will just get this number as a string, or you can do it the way we've been doing it in the past and just say the word string and then wrap this whole thing in a pair of parentheses. So we're going to convert into a string everything in between these two parentheses, and now that should work. Okay, so we have no errors, and let's test this out. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to win and restart. I don't have a position. Well, why don't I have a position? That's kind of weird. What happens if I lose? Okay, we still don't have a position. So let me double check this really quick. Is string not working? Number of racers finished. Let me see something really quick. Test this out. So add end screen, just num racers finished. Oh, that's not going to work. I already tested that. Let's try it with toString instead. Start. Then if we win, show something. No. Oh, man, this is probably this font. My font probably doesn't have numbers. I bet that's what it is. So let me go back into here. Oops. Redo. I'm just making sure I didn't undo anything on accident. All right, so I'm going to go back into my thing. And just to test this out, I'm going to say 0 under add end screen. Let me see if this is my font instead of my program. So if I start and win the game. Okay, so my font doesn't have the number 0, which is kind of annoying. So give me 1 second. I'm going to change my font around so that way I don't have to deal with this madness. Okay, so now I fixed my font and the number is actually displaying. So I'm going to go back into my code. Oops, let me get that open for you. Back into my code. And under add end screen, I'm going to put back what I had there before, which was num racers finished, wrapped in a string. And if I run and play and win the game, come on, win. It says 0. Okay, well I didn't place in 0, I placed in first, right? So I need to add 1 to num racers finished before we call add end screen. So I'm going to say num racers finished plus. Or actually, let's not put this here. We're going to put that in our player move. So when our player crosses the stage, right, our player should win the game. So we should say num racers finished plus and then end the game. So let's see how that works. I start, click, and run, and then win. Okay, first place. But what happens if I lose? Well, let's see what happens if I win again, actually. Let's do that first. Now I'm in second. What did we not do? We didn't reset the number of players finished when we reset our game. So let's go ahead and do that. So in end game, we're saying is race started is false. Do all this other stuff, add the end screen, and after we add the end screen, we can say num racers finished equals 0. And let's test this out so that we can play multiple times and we don't have to worry about it. So we win, we got first place, cool, first place again. All right, so I fixed that, and just so you can see the code, just after add end screen, we need to set it equal to 0. If you set this equal to 0 before add end screen, well then it's just going to display 0, right? So anyway, what happens if I lose? I should come in second, right? So I'm going to let this thing go, and he won, and now I'm in place 33. How does that work? Well, if you remember, in our racer movie clip, we had an action for finished race. And actually, I'm going to change this right now. You should go ahead and do this as well. Go into your racer movie clip and go under actions and say is Okay, let's call this is finished with race. All right, inside of our racer movie clip. Okay, and let's copy this value because we're going to need it later. So back into our main stage, underneath actions, well, let's try and figure out why the number 33 was happening. Well, when our player crosses the right side of the stage, right, we just add 1 and then we end the game. So because we end the game and we never come back into this move player function, it can't be this function here. What about our computer, right? So in update game, if the computer finishes and they're off the right side of the stage, we're going to add 1 to num racers finished. But if you remember, update game is an enter frame event, right? We used the enter frame event up here to get update game. But what's happening is we're not stopping the check once we count once. So every time update game runs and MC computer is off the right side of the stage, we're going to keep adding 1 over and over and over every single time that ticks. So what we need to do is only check that once. And how do we do that? Well, that's where that Boolean comes into place. So what we can do when we start, right, the computer hasn't finished the race yet, right? So that variable we have should be set to false. So we say if MC computer 1 dot, and remember how we access properties inside of a movie clip is a dot. So then we're going to say is finished with race, which is referring to that Boolean that we put inside of our movie clip. So if computer 1 is finished with race, well, we don't want to check to see if they're finished with the race already. We want to say if they're not finished with the race. So I want to say if it equals false, right? Then we will add on to num racers finished. And I'm just going to press tab on this so it slides up nice and easy. But what's the problem with this? So let's only do if computer is not finished with race. Okay, so what's the problem with this? Well, are we changing the value of is finished with race? No. So every single time is finished with race is still going to be false, so this isn't doing anything at all. What we need to do is increment that value. Sorry, or not increment, but change that value. So what we can do is say if it's false, well then let's set it to true. So we'll say MC computer 1 dot is finished with race equals true. So that way, when it goes inside and sees that is finished with race is false, it'll set it to true, and the next time it comes back to this if statement, well, is finished with race will be true, so we'll never do any of these things in here. So if this is done correctly, and we play the game and we lose, I'm just really good at this game. So there we go. We lost, and I'm waiting, not touching, not touching, not touching. We go to the end. It says second place. Awesome. But there is one problem with that, and I'll show you again. I probably should have left that open. Do we ever reset whether or not the player or the computer finished the race? No, right? So the first time we go through our game, it works. But then if we restart and start again, and then let's let them win and wait just a little bit. Now it says 1. Wait, what's going on here? Well, because we never reset our is race finished on our computer, it counts them as having true, right? So let's look at that. So if is finished race was set to true to the beginning, then it thinks we've already counted them and doesn't count them again. So when we reset our game or end our game, we need to set this value back to false. So if we go copy this and go down into end game, we say num racers finished. Right underneath, we'll say MC computer 1 dot is finished with race equals false. And just in case we end up changing this on our player as well, let's end it here. Let's reset this value here too for a player. So we'll say MC player dot is finished with race equals false. We'll say reset variables for game. And later on, we'll probably put this part into a reset game function because we're starting to get a lot of stuff here. But let's test this out, and this will be the last thing we do for this part of the video. But if we go in the player, if the computer wins and we end, it should say 2, and then if we lose again, it should say 2 again. Cool, so we fixed that. And I'm going to stop this part of the video here.